So I think everyone has, at a time in their life, just found music that reached them right at the right moment. When I went to college and my roommate played Nirvana for me for the first time, I realized I was a decade too late for grunge, but I did not care. You know, just rocking out and listening to this music that was speaking to me on a level I've never been touched before. Thank you for joining me for yet another episode of the Everyman Movie Review. We're continuing our theme of historical figures and historical stories, and this one is a little more understated, but I'm hoping you'll find that it fits in the theme the same way I did. We're going to be talking about Blinded by the Light, which is a true story. It was written based on a true story, at least let me say that, and it's something that we probably wouldn't know anything about other than by the screenplay. And I love when movies have music as a theme. In my day job, I work for a music company, so anytime I can involve music and movies together, I know it's going to be great. Rocket Man, I think I did a review of that. It was really great. Yesterday, which I know for sure I didn't do, but I should have done a review of. I just kind of saw it in a time when I saw a bunch of movies and just never really got it made. Also great. Beatles music, Elton John music, and now we're turning to an American icon, somebody who's actually American in Bruce Springsteen. But we're not telling a story about an American kid. We're telling a story about how Bruce Springsteen, a decade after he probably hit his peak popularity, really spoke to a Pakistani kid living in the UK. And that description, if somebody told me that, I'm like, I'm in, you got me, let's go watch it. And yet, I didn't see it in a theater when I could have seen it in a theater. And then it was on the list of things to see when theaters shut down. So, joke's on me. But before we get too far into the movie, let's get through the pleasantry, shall we? Blinded by the Light was directed by Gurinder Chadha. It was written by Sarfraz Mansoor, Gurinder Chadha, Paul Maeda Burgess. It is, of course, inspired and based on the book by Sarfraz Mansoor, and that in turn, and the movie itself, is inspired and based on the songs, lyrics, and music by Bruce Springsteen. It is starring Viveik Kalra as Javed, Dean Charles Chapman as Matt, Kim Reeve as Emma, David Heyman as Mr. Evans, Kulvinder Gier as Malik, his father, Nikita Mehta as Shazia, his sister, Rob Brydon as Matt's dad, Meera Ganatra as Noor, his mom, Tara Davina as Yasmin, his cousin, Jeff Mirza as Mr. Shah, and James Ballinger as the most American, most New Jerseyan passport official ever. The guy you probably saw in the previews and trailers if you saw them. So I think everyone has, at a time in their life, just found music that reached them right at the right moment. I was into a lot of Christian music and then Christian country music in my early teens, and then kind of discovered gangster rap in my late teens, and just imagine that, picture that in your head. I dated a girl who was really into alt rock, and she got me into alt rock kind of in later years of high school. But when I went to college and my roommate played Nirvana for me for the first time, I realized I was a decade too late for grunge, but I did not care. Kurt Cobain and his words, his lyrics, the music of that band changed my life. It gave me a whole different perspective and probably pushed me down the path of the person I am today, the narcissistic nihilist. So maybe good, maybe bad, I guess. But Javed has kind of the same situation. He is a Pakistani boy in the 1980s living in the UK, outside of London, southern England area. There is a large Indian and Pakistani community there for reasons we are not going to dive into right now, but the economy is not great and everyone's kind of struggling. So he is in this place where he is a really great writer and he really wants to write, but he feels like he's a fish out of water because his family wants him to be one thing, all of his English friends want him to be something else, and he doesn't know what he wants to be. And a friend of his introduces him to the music of Bruce Springsteen, and he says, oh yeah, I know this guy. He was popular like 20 years ago. Why would I ever want to listen to this? But then, in one frustrating night, he pops the headphones on and he goes for a walk, and I think the director did such an amazing job of like showing the lyrics popping up places, and he's like in a world that is made up of the lyrics. And I can tell you, when I went on a walk around Hofstra's campus with Nirvana's Nevermind and In Utero just banging in my ears, I felt exactly like Javed feels when he experienced Bruce Springsteen for the first time, including, in my own mind, the lyrics popping up and, just rocking out and listening to this music that was speaking to me on a level I've never been touched before. For Javid Moore, it drove him in the direction of saying, I'm going to be who I want to be. I want to be like Bruce. And I mean, the great thing about Bruce Springsteen is I think he is as a person everything he holds himself out to be, on stage. I think there are a lot of people who are performers who are not. I know there's a lot of people who are like good country singers and they don't like the rural lifestyle. I think that's what new country is, right? It's like people who are city dwellers but who write music for people who live in the country. Not really a thing for me. 21 Savage got a whole bunch of problems because he was rapping about like being in the trap house and being on the streets, and turns out he was a British guy who moved here when he was a kid and then got deported at some point. So my point is just that not everyone is the person they show themselves to be on stage and who they're performing as. Bruce is. I like to think Kurt Cobain was as well. And so this sends Javid down a road of like skewing away from his family and skewing away from, in ways because of that, his religion, his upbringing, everything that he thought about his life is changing. Looking back on 18-year-old me walking around Hofstra's campus with Nirvana in my ears, with the benefit of time from 36. It's always that feeling that I like to compare to Plinko from The Price is Right. That when you have the disc in your hand, the whole board is open to you. And wherever you decide to drop it, every step down that board eliminates some possibilities. You're just, and that's how life is a lot, right? Like when you start walking and you shut yourself off to paths, eventually you are someplace and you either have to decide, do I stop and turn around and go back, or do I just keep going forward? And when I moved to LA a few years ago, it was literally a point where I said, nope, I am done. I'm shutting this down. I'm going to back up and go back to where I think I should have been at 22 or 23 and go that way. And it's tough to do that. So thinking back on myself and seeing myself in Javid, I can see that like all of that potential of just thinking your life is going to be one whole thing and being frustrated by that idea. And then having this whole world open up to you and just saying, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to do it. And of course, he's going to clash with his family. There's a lot of strict rituals that he should be involved in, religious and familial and a lot of stuff. And he basically just gets so focused on Bruce that he can't think of anything else. And he lets everything else slide, not just the family. But, there's a girl, and sometimes you got to let women go by the wayside because the mission, the music is more important. And it's just, he's like coming of age. I guess that's the difference too, is that like when I had this awakening, I was 18 or 19 and in college, and he is younger. He's still in high school, although they call it college, right? Like grade 12, grade 11. He's still there. So for him, it's a little earlier, and maybe there's a lot more at stake, rebelling against parents while you're still dependent on them to live, for example. But I think there's just a lesson there about choosing your own path and not feeling like the world is your oyster. Your life is what you make of it. And when you get down the road, you don't want to look back and say, I'm sorry that I let someone control me there and drive me this direction, because now I regret all of it. Sometimes you just got to say, I'm going to stop. I'm going to upset a bunch of people and I'm going to go my own way. And damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And I've been kicking around whether or not to do a spoiler section about this. I'm realizing that it was in the previews, most of this stuff. Like, the story here is about how all of this happens. The fact that he discovers Bruce Springsteen and that drives it is nothing. All of the details of people who are just voting against their interest and who back people that they shouldn't and who are so worried about keeping up with the Joneses, and there's all of that in there. And how a kid who's 17 years old is trying to mentally break away from that rat race and just find his own way. That's the story. Now, how it's done is everything, and it's why you should check out this movie. And then that way there's no spoilers. And also, there's a moment in the trailer where, again, as I mentioned, talking about the actors, the guy's like, I can't think of a better reason to visit the United States of America. Bam! That's like 7 minutes from the end of the movie. So like, maybe me telling you that was a spoiler, but who cares? What it comes down to is like, the music of Bruce Springsteen facilitates this change in him, and then he goes to discover what it is he wants to do, who he wants to be, and it's amazing. I regret not seeing it in a movie theater because, well, honestly, I've not been a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen's music historically. I'm not really a rock fan, but there's something about the contextual nature of having it in here with Javed as we're going on this mission with him and finding a song that fits this moment that really makes music that you might not listen to otherwise really great. So as far as like our usual questions, do you not like Bruce Springsteen? Like at all? Like the music, some hypnotists made sure that when you hear that music, you physically vomit. Well, then not the movie for you. Otherwise, if you like music at all, I think you'll find a way to love this movie. If you like Bruce Springsteen music, you're definitely going to like it. It's like, again, being a Beatles fan and watching Yesterday or Across the Universe or any number of movies that have the Beatles as the theme. But there's so little not to like about this movie. It's heartwarming, it's inspirational, and there are parts where it gets you on the edge of your seat because you're so worried for Javed, and there's such cathartic release in other places. Like, of all the movies I've reviewed, it is possibly the most adult theme, because I think Dora did a lot of this really well, but had to appeal to children too. It is the most adult-driven, adult-themed movie that just, I think everyone will love. You can sit down and watch it with anyone, and everyone will come out of it just feeling better. And maybe I'm also having this reaction because the world being what it is, we really need these kind of stories. We need these movies that are just like, man, it may not look like it today, but everything is going to be okay. We are going to push through, and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We're always going to make it better. And that's what this movie, the cathartic just release all throughout as it builds and releases and builds and releases. Just, it's slightly exhausting, but at the same time, it's so good. It's like a massage where like someone's just working that knot, but as soon as it gets pushed out, you're like, oh, butter. It's got funny moments, it's got sad moments, it's heartwarming. It's got a runtime of 120 minutes or so, which isn't too long, and it doesn't ever drag. It's just perfectly structured and bounces along. I cannot give it any higher compliment. Like, I will probably watch this again because I don't think any of my friends who I would go see with in the theater actually watched it when it came out on VOD. I'm going to force them to sit down and watch it again just because it is so great. So if you're not excited to watch it by now, I don't know what else I can tell you. I enthusiastically, and I haven't been able to say that a lot lately in these reviews, but I enthusiastically say everyone should go see this movie. So go see this movie. But before you do that, make sure you check out some of the wonderful content that I have here on this channel. Everyman Movie Review just hit 1 year old, so we got plenty of reviews that are out there. When you're looking for something new, always check here first to see if I've done a review of it, and maybe save yourself some time in the back end. And of course, there's more than just reviews on this channel. Tons of great content. Make sure you take a look. We are keeping up with our pace of 2 episodes per week, which means a Thursday and 1 day in between a new episode of Everyman Movie Reviews. But if that's not enough content for you, I also have a daily podcast, Rob Explains, where I talk about cool, interesting, and random things and try to share some of the stuff that I find super interesting with the world. And you can find that daily at anchor.fm or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And every week, we're going to do a synopsis video of all the episodes from the week. You'll be able to check that out on YouTube. But we'll be back in just a few days with yet another episode. I am looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great week, everybody.